the piece?
I just have a vague memory of that. I don't remember who did steal that, John. I remember trying to cut a deal to recover it, and actually Bob Bigelow was actually involved in that. But I don't want to. I don't remember. I don't remember who the guy was that took it or how he got access to it. By the way, with all that stuff John rattled off there with gravity, A waves, and blah, 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 before you take callers from the public, we know that earth scientists do not agree that gravity is a wave, and we know that there should be so much waste heat from an antimatter reaction in a little reactor inside of a flying disk that everything would melt, and we understand that. I mean, we're not scientists, and we can't answer those questions as where did all the waste heat go and the arguments about gravity being a wave, just for the record.
Okay. Well, I remember that there was one of the pieces was stolen, and I thought it was like a neighbor or a friend or a hanger-on who was at the house and was interested in all the UFO stuff who took it, and somehow you got it back. But and I just
don't remember his name or how that came about, because I remember Bob was real upset that it happened, and we had to try and cut a deal to get it back and go meet with a guy, and we were setting a meeting out at the old Las Vegas Speedway, not the new one, the old one over in northeast part of town there, and all of that, and I don't want to start. I don't remember the names and how it happened. So,
what happened to the piece? I mean, you know what happened to it. Can you say how much? Can you say?
Well, it was. He buried it at a place where
it'd be hard for anybody to get it.
It would be hard to get, but it would be secure at that location for a long time, and would be obvious if its containment was ever jeopardized.
So basically, it's known where that piece is.
Yeah.
Speaking of elements,
by the way, it's not like I could drive there and go pick it up, or I would.
Right. Speaking of strange elements, the element polonium surfaces much later in the Bob Lazar story. Of course, after this UFO stuff, Bob tries to leave all of it behind, doesn't want to talk about it anymore, starts up a scientific supply business online, United Nuclear, and sells all kinds of weird stuff to schools and labs. And one of the things that he sold was something called polonium. And it surfaced in a major news story a year or so ago, 2 years ago, when a Russian spy was killed, presumably through the use of polonium. And news organizations start looking around to see where could somebody get polonium, and whose name comes up?
Bob Lazar, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, how'd that work out?
Well, he always had things like that around. I remember him talking about polonium, and in fact, he had ordered some polonium and beryllium from a scientific supply place a long time ago. And a guy from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission came by Bob's house and wanted to know why he wanted polonium and beryllium, because those are actuators, like I know what I'm talking about here. They're actuators in the nuclear explosion. In an atomic bomb, polonium and beryllium are actuators of some sort. So when he ordered some and tried to buy some back then, the NRC sent a guy by his house who really knew what he was talking about, and Bob couldn't talk his way out of it, because the guy said, well, for what you need, you can use these other things. You don't need polonium and beryllium, because Bob had a pseudo-purpose other than whatever he wanted it for. And so then when he opened up his own scientific supply place, he found a supplier of it. But we're talking about, it's just so they can use it to detect it with Geiger counters. I mean, you could fit the amount he's selling would fit on the head of a pin, so it's not a quantity of it.
Let's talk about broad strokes here. We got a couple of minutes left before we open up the phone lines. Did you first, you John, and then you Gene, did you have any idea at the time that this was going to become this big? I mean, the Area 51 story is sort of a phenomenon. It's known all over the world. They, books and movies and things of that sort, and T-shirts and ashtrays and trinkets and posters, and it's been featured on all kinds of TV shows and in all kinds of articles in the UFO field and beyond. Did you have any idea how big it would get back then?
Well, first of all, you said a couple months after he did the thing in Silhouette. I think it was the week after, because we did that on the record, and you said the phone was ringing off the hook, and it was the next day that you had Bob do the Silhouette interview, and then the day after that you came up here with Bob Stoldow and interviewed Bob to find out what his credibility was. But the answer to what I thought, I honestly believe that after he did that interview in Silhouette, that the story would break worldwide and everybody would know that we had flying saucers and aliens were visiting us and everything. I honestly believe that.
I did too, George. I thought we were seeing a change in the world. In fact, I would tell Bob before it ever went public. I'd say, boy, you know, this would make a great screenplay. And in fact, right after he got caught, I was going to put material together to write a book, and he knew I had done some screenwriting in the past and gone to screenwriting lectures and courses and things like that. And he said, "Don't write a book. Why don't you write a screenplay?" And like you said, I wrote the screenplay, and of course that movie's almost been made 4 or 5 times now, but always falls through for whatever, through the millions of normal Hollywood reasons. And but yes, I did think this. In fact, I was talking to John today when Bob was in the program, and when he started telling us some things, and when when he started hinting around about taking us out to see the disc test, he'd tell me about being with his partner, and I'd say, "Well, what's his name?" And he goes, "I don't know." And I'd say, "Well, don't they have those name tags on just like you have that you pick up when you go to work?" And he'd say, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, if I were you, I'd start noticing some people's names just in case things go bad." And because Bob's got a bad memory anyway, and he would work there and be so absorbed in what he was working on, you know, he'd see a number of people with name badges on and wouldn't even notice what their names were. And so, yeah, I convinced him to start looking at people's names because I did think this would be a worldwide story, and it would certainly be helpful if you could locate any of these other people to corroborate what Bob was saying.
I guess you weren't thinking about the marketing potential immediately. I mean, you thought about a screenplay, but good gosh, this thing has become a cottage industry. It's gone in so many different directions and all over the world. In
fact, John and I just said today that there's nobody on this planet that has made less money from ufology than me and John Leary. Everybody in the world has sold videos and books and everything in the world. We haven't made a cent.
And you were there in the beginning.
Right.
Well, how has it changed your lives? You know, John, you pretty much believed that this stuff was possible, and so there was no fundamental shift in your belief system, but it's had to have had an effect on your life personally, economically.
Yeah, it really was. And, you know, at that time I was working for American Transair, and, of course, everybody, or, you know, most of the people know that in July of 89, which is a month or two, or a couple months after this happened, they called me in and they said, "John, you don't really believe this stuff, do you?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I do." And they said, "Well, you know, we can't have a captain flying an L-1011 with passengers who believes in flying saucers." And that was it for me. They fired me, and it was probably a good thing that happened because I went to work for the cargo airlines there in Detroit and had a lot of fun, met a great bunch of guys, and really had a career kind of change. Instead of flying, you know, passengers and have to worry about them, I was flying cargo boxes, and, you know, it's all night flying, and it was just worked out great for me because I'd rather fly at night and sleep all day long.
And Gene, for you, you mentioned that this isn't the kind of thing that you cashed in on in any way, but it has had to have a profound effect on how you see the world around you, hasn't it?
It did. I actually started reading everything I could get my hands on. You know, again, with me, it's the basic of questions of man. Yes, gravity propulsion and antimatter reactors, and that's interesting to a degree, but, you know, who are we, where do we come from, where are we going to, life after death, God, you know, the basic questions of man are what I'm interested in, and you know, I think if anything, you know, with knowledge comes unhappiness, and knowing where we stand on the interstellar food chain, and not necessarily believing anymore that, you know what I mean. Knowing where you stand on the interstellar food chain, and you know, I'm pretty much back down for. I was born and raised a Christian and went to a Lutheran grade school, and you know, I'm all the way down to life as a series of chemical reactions, And of course, the one thing that I think I gained out of it is that I truly believe, while I don't believe that